Hey there, welcome to the Riverfront Reds Show, where on this edition we try to unearth the ghost of Red Sox past to discover what could happen with the 2025 Cincinnati Reds. Chris Garber is here with me. I am Seth Shaner. Chris, thanks for joining me.
My pleasure. Always happy to be on the Riverfront.
Well, I'm always happy to have you give me show ideas, because it was a tweet that you put out that you had watched it and you were looking for kind of Easter eggs kind of to see, hey, what do you think Terry Francona would do for the Reds in this situation or that situation? And honestly, I'll tell you the truth. I had kind of resigned myself that I didn't think I was going to watch. And it's the 2004 Netflix documentary about the Red Sox that came back from 3-0 to the Yankees. I kind of said, I'm not going to watch. I've watched the 30 for 30. I lived it. I watched it. I know it's been 20 years, but it doesn't really feel that long ago to me. But seeing your tweet kind of made me think, he's got a point, and I'd like to find out more. Even though I've read Terry Francona's book, I've obviously lived around Cleveland Guardians fans here in Central Ohio who adore the man. So I know a lot about him. But I think you had a good point there, and hopefully folks feel the same way.
Yeah, I was not interested in watching that show either, to tell you the truth. I mean, Yankees, Red Sox, two of my least favorite teams. Let's spend whatever it is, 3 hours with them. But I don't know. Somebody was talking about how it was actually good, and I said I'll give it a shot, and I was hooked, man. It's worth it, especially in the hot stove season. It's a crazy time, a crazy couple seasons, and you really get a look kind of behind the curtain of how they built that team. And like you're saying, you get some behind the scenes at what Terry Francona meant to that team and what kind of leader he is, and hopefully some things he'll bring to the Reds.
Well, and the coolest part of that story, now certainly I'm kind of with you. I kind of always, as far as American League teams, I rooted for the Yankees once Paul O'Neill went there, and I didn't have the same feelings that a lot of, like the Cleveland fans have the feelings about the Yankees, as if, oh my goodness, Steimer just spent more money. And, I never had to deal with that as a Reds fan, as far as the Yankees being the bad guy. Pretty much the rest of baseball is a bad guy compared to the Reds, the way they spend money or don't. But I will say the perfect bookend to that whole story of the being 3 games down is the year before. And this documentary does a great job at starting there. Earlier this year, I got to have Scott Williamson on Red Leg Roundtable, and I was amazed at how much A, he still remembered, and B, how little he likes Grady Little.
Yeah, that's the part. I didn't expect that either, and I really enjoyed kind of going through that again, because I remember that season, and I think at the time I was cheering for Aaron Boone when he beat the Red Sox, and I remember being like, "What the hell is Grady Little doing?" And then the next year I was kind of cheering for that comeback. So it was, as kind of just a fan of baseball, it's a cool way to just get into a story where there's a ton of drama.
Yeah.
And yeah, you kind of got to see how Theo Epstein and John Henry built that team and what they thought about it and how they got there.
Well, and the point that was made in the documentary, and they didn't quite. That's what happens sometimes in documentaries. They either leave it on the cutting room floor, or they want a certain narrative to play, so they don't really address it. The Red Sox addressed their bullpen at the trade deadline in 2003, and it happened to be, from a Reds point of view, yes, Aaron Boone went to the Yankees, but Scott Williamson was dealt to the Red Sox. And in fact, Scott shared with me, and I probably knew this at the time, but I had forgotten, that his wife had one of their children around that time, within a week or so, a few days of him getting traded, and there were some problems with the birth. And Scott shared that with me on the show, and he said Epstein and all those guys couldn't have been better about it. They said, take your time, stay with your family. He didn't report to the Red Sox for an extra couple of days, I guess.
That's right. Now I do remember that now. Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
But the thing I will say also, though, is, like I said, that the narrative was kind of spun that the bullpen was still a problem, and it took all these cowboy up guys to get them out of things. And that was mostly the case all year. But when Williamson came and they had a few other guys there, they really settled things down. And in fact, in that game, to your point, he came out and he left Pedro in, and they did a very good job of highlighting that. But it wasn't going to be Scott Williamson coming in next, but they had a clear 1, 2, 3 plan for like getting 8 outs or whatever it was. And they thought it was perfect. The guys in the bullpen were pumped up and ready to go, and the bullpen gate even open, and so Scott didn't really get to take part. He thought he was going to close out the game and go to the World Series, and he didn't get to. So he's obviously still a little bit burned by that.
Yeah, I don't blame him.
No, but anyway, the undercurrents, they were churning in 03. The former Reds, we mentioned Scott Williamson, Aaron Boone hit that home run. I remember I was two things happened around that time. Like, do you remember the Peyton Manning comeback against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? Like, it was in 02 or 03. And it was so like, I don't even know, Monday Night Football might have still started at 9 p.m. back then. It was so late into the night. And here I was a young sports writer. And because I was a sports writer, I was on basically still on college time. I was just out of college. And I remember that game. And I remember the Aaron Boone game, home run in game 7 being so late. Because in college, you just call your buddies or your buddies you live with, right?
Right.
Here I'm living alone. It's after midnight in these both cases, both the Peyton Manning comeback and this home run. And what do I do? I want to talk to somebody, and I'm alone here, but I can't call anybody, that's the responsible adult is not awake right now, or I can't count on it. But one of my friends, Joe Vigorito, he left Ohio State and he actually went to the French Culinary Institute. And now he's a big-time executive chef in Manhattan. But at the time, he was working at a restaurant. And I'm like, Joe's going to be up. And here he was walking home from work. And every other sports bar or whatever, pizza place or whatever, had the game on in the window, right? And he says he sees Aaron Boone hit that home run basically while out with a bunch of New Yorkers walking home from work. And I called him and we're just screaming into the phone. And he goes, I know that's your boy, because being Aaron Boone, right? And he knows I'm a Reds fan. That was a cool memory to have that. That was really fun.
I was in San Diego, and I remember I was sitting in my little condo, and I was by myself. And I remember I screamed so much that like my dog would come in my office with me, and he'd climb up on like the easy chair and sleep there. And I remember just scaring the crap out of him, yelling. He jumps up, looking around, what's going on. But yeah, that was a cool moment. It's crazy that it's 21 years ago. That part just,
yeah,
it's.
I've had that theory for a long time. Certainly, you're 4 years of high school, and if you took 4 years of college, not everybody does. I get it. And of course, if you're a lawyer, you have more college. But those 8 years, to call it high school and college, those feel like the longest times of your life, because obviously, when you're just out of high school, those 4 years were a huge part of your entire lifetime. Whereas now, post college to now, for me, has been 23 years. I guess it's like it doesn't seem like that long, even though it's such a bigger sample size, as we like to say in baseball.
Yeah, you get in that routine, and you're not doing new things and having new experiences, meeting new people all the time.
Right. So there were several either former or future Reds involved. I left a few out that never actually appeared in games or only appeared in a few on the baseball reference page for the Red Sox or Yankees. Ruben Sierra, he had a short stint as a Red. He was heavily used by Joe Torre on those Yankee teams. You had future Red Bronson Arroyo at the time. Remember, he played a vital role in some of that, especially with A-Rod slapping his hand out of the way, right? Miguel Cairo was big on those teams. And then future Red Orlando Cabrera, he's the one that got traded for Nomar, and everybody laughed at the Red Sox. Remember? I mean, I remember. Yeah. So it was really funny because at the newspaper I worked at here in Columbus, we had a photographer who was a Red Sox fan. She was just, I don't know, I guess she had ties to New England, but she grew up by Toledo. She loved Nomar. She loved the Red Sox. And when A-Rod was supposedly on his way to the Red Sox, that winter, we were at like a Christmas party for our work for the newspaper, the company party. And she was so angry that A-Rod was, and obviously it meant that Nomar's got to go, right? At that point, she was so angry. And then, it feels like only a day or two later that got nixed, obviously. And then all of a sudden, Aaron Boone tears his ACL playing basketball, and other Reds tie in. And now A-Rod's got to play third base for the Yankees to save the evil empire.
What's really funny is I had no recollection of that A-Rod to the Red Sox, like Maglio, Ordonez, Manny, all those guys. I had no memory of that whatsoever. I almost felt like I was watching one, in the movies where they get like Dan Patrick to make like a fake
Yeah.
sports report about,
Yeah,
whatever. That's how it felt to me. I was like, is this real? I totally blocked that out. And obviously I remember him getting traded from Texas to New York, but I didn't remember any of that other stuff, any of the drama with Nomar,
Uh-huh.
with his teammates, like basically counting him out and being interviewed accordingly that they thought he was gone. Yeah, I totally blocked that out, which it really is a crazy layer of drama to that story.
Well, it's kind of like Terry Francona too. We want to highlight that as far as what we think, how it affects the Reds, and certainly we want him to come in and hold people accountable. And Terry talked about in this documentary, and it reminds me a little bit of Urban Meyer when he came to Ohio State, and he's basically like, "We're not putting up with this anymore. It's either my way or the highway." And all the great coaches and managers probably do that, but in an era where Nomar was the famous guy, Red Sox, right? He was the guy. And basically, Francona is basically like, well, I told him maybe it's better if you're not here anymore. And it's like, oh my goodness, you said that to Nomar Garciaparra. And it's like, and he's like, you put me in a tight spot here or there. I just was really impressed with Terry Francona. Certainly, that's kind of what we want as a Reds fan, is to say, hey, come hold these guys accountable.
Yeah, I think that's true. And you could tell he pretty quickly got respect of the team. One thing they didn't go into a ton was the decision to hire him there in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
I would have liked to know a little bit more, like why Terry Francona and kind of how they made that decision. It kind of just, they went a little bit of his history managing the Phillies, and he just kind of showed up, really, right?
It was, and it was. I mean, think about it too. When Joe Torre got hired by the Yankees, he had some unforgettable stints as a manager. And so same thing happened with Terry Francona. He was not a good manager with the Phillies. There's a local reporter here in Columbus who's covered Ohio State since like 2005, but in a prior job, he covered the Phillies for a newspaper somewhere in Delaware, I think, that's right there along that area. And he says, I'm a young reporter trying to make my way and make noise and stuff like that. And he's like, I remember asking Terry Francona some really stupid questions because I thought, you're not getting your job done, and what's wrong with you, and things like that. And it's like, he had a very forgettable stint as the Phillies manager. You're right. So it was kind of odd at the time. I remember people wondering about that hire.
Yeah. I liked a lot, what I liked about what you could see from the interviews then and now is that he has he has more than one gear.
Mm-hmm.
He's able to go to Nomar and be like, look, this isn't working out, and kind of lay down the law. But with other guys, he had that kind of soft touch where he's like, I'm just going to go stand over there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to try to tell him anything. I mean, was it Manny where he's like, I went and watched. Who was it? Was it Manny? He started watching him in the batting cage.
No, it was Ortiz. I had that.
Yeah, that's right. Ortiz,
that was hilarious. Yeah. Go ahead and tell it.
Well, yeah. So he's just standing by David Ortiz and watching him take batting practice. And at one point, Ortiz turns around and looks at him and is like, what? And he doesn't say anything. He's like, what? Is something wrong with my swing? You got something to say? And Francona, I wish I remembered the exact quote, and I probably shouldn't say it on the air, but it was something like, what the hell am I going to say to you? I bet a 210 for my career or whatever.
I
loosely, keep doing your thing.
I loosely typed it out. Poppy asked Tito, because you're right. Like, if it wasn't normal for the manager to be like leering over through the cage, right? It's like, what are you doing here? And Poppy asked Tito if he wanted to tell him something about his swing, and he goes, "Who, me? I hit 170. You're the Hall of Famer."
Yeah.
like that sets somebody at ease, though.
Yeah, I mean, he has nothing to prove. We've seen so many managers in Cincinnati. I mean, you got a guy like way back, Dave Miley, who was a career minor league manager, who was trying to prove that he belonged to the majors, or even Bob Boone, who was always seemed like he was trying to show how smart he was, or David Bell, whatever the heck he was trying to do. Francona just seems like he doesn't have anything to prove to anybody. And he's just going to be himself all the time.
Mm-hmm. And
he's not stupid. He's not like blundering around, but he's honest and authentic all the time. And that really came through in that show more than anything to me.
Well, and listen, Ortiz was an interesting story, and they told a little bit of it, how he got basically cut by the Twins, and he wasn't in their plans, and then all of a sudden they scooped him up, and Pedro claimed he was the one that said you should sign him and all that. But so he probably had some insecurities because he'd been cut before. But at the same time, these are the best of the best guys, and sometimes I think we think that they're just full of confidence all the time. And to me, when I watch Terry Francona deal with him that way, and some of the ways he dealt with other guys, and hopefully we'll deal with the Reds, it's that idea that I know you are making X amount of dollars, and we'll have a little more on that later, but I know you're this, I know you've established this, but I'm here to tell you you're good. And you need to understand that, and you need to keep on playing the game the way you got here.
Yeah.
Sometimes thin skin can come across as more like lack of self-confidence or self-esteem.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you see guys like, there are guys like Pete Rose who may not have ever had a second of self-doubt in his entire life.
Yeah.
But you see a guy like Tua Tagovailoa, right, who had that interview, it's kind of famous, where he's like, do I suck?
Mm-hmm.
Where he's just being totally honest and vulnerable with his coach. And most guys won't do that, but I think they're thinking it.
Oh, yeah. And it's those guys that sometimes people roll their eyes if a guy claims, "Oh, there's a guy coming to take my job every year at spring training," and there's probably people that have to tell themselves that to really motivate themselves and get going.
Yeah,
I want to mention Pokey Reese. He played a lot on that team in 2004, and he was a late inning replacement. And I remember talking to him a little bit about that year as well, and certainly he's part of that. That was really cool. Pokey this year, he was the grand marshal with Dimitri Young at the opening day parade in Cincinnati. And like 3 days later, he's in Boston celebrating the 20-year anniversary of the World Series. I mean, certainly a little bigger deal winning a World Series than just, hey, we won a lot of games that one year, but pretty cool.
Did he make the final out of the World Series? I feel like there was a clip, maybe turned a double play late in one of the games. I don't remember.
He threw it to Minkiewicz. Yeah, no, he did. And just amazing. And certainly he did. Pokey, he had his best year of his career was 99. He batted 285. He had like 37 stolen bases, maybe 37, 38 doubles. He had a good year, Gold Glove multiple times. But that World Series certainly had to be one of the coolest rides ever, right? I got the thing on Nomar. Tito said, sometimes you can't tell somebody something they want to hear. I thought that, to your point, he's not like Gomer Pyle or something. Yeah. But at the same time, that's not that deep, but it's also pretty prescient to say, hey, you can't always just tell the guy what he wants to hear all the time, because that's not really going to get the job done.
Yeah. Yeah, Francona, I think what's unique about him, there are probably managers who have that kind of way with people and who have that kind of motivation and leadership style. What Francona is good at, too, is explaining it to the press and the fans and the viewers.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he can explain that stuff, and you're like, oh, yeah, duh, that's obvious. And maybe Dusty Baker does that all the time, but Dusty's kind of, when he talks, everything's kind of a riddle and a little bit of like, it's wrapped in a story about Ralph Garr and Hank Aaron. But Francona, like, he can explain how he's doing it in a way that's not throwing players under the bus, but kind of lets people in on it. And it makes him look good too. But I think I'm excited to see, kind of just to watch him as much as I am a lot of the players on the team, truthfully.
That's one reason why I've had a hard time verbalizing my thoughts on, you remember his introductory press conference, and he got the laughs. Like, his timing was perfect and everything he said. But some of it, because I've seen Terry Francona in those types of deals for 20 years now, I kind of was like, well, yeah, but that's what Terry Francona says. And I don't mean that as a criticism, but at the same time, it's like, well, he's getting kudos for saying the right thing all the time, in part because we just haven't had that.
Yeah.
And so part of me was like, well, I don't think it's an act. And even if it was, maybe it doesn't matter, because maybe if he fools the right guys, he can manage the baseball team well too. But I just felt like when I saw, and I remember talking to you, you were excited about the press conference, and my goodness, we haven't seen that. Like, but I'm like, okay, do we get super excited over the guy who says the right thing just because the last guy didn't? Like,
Well, I don't think I mean, I think it's that plus, right? I mean, the guy's won everywhere.
sure.
All his players love him. Like, it's not, you can win the press conference and lose the season, but he's also, has the skins on the wall to show that he can actually deliver,
Right.
behind the scenes. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it's Cincinnati, like, you've got these guys who just maybe they have some like personal charisma sometimes, but they just seem to be stumbling and staggering through these press conferences from David Bell to Marvin Lewis to watching Zach Taylor, like kind of at a loss for any kind of answer whatsoever right now with the Bengals. Like it's, I don't know. Like I said, I don't want to overrate that part of it, but I'm just like, God, it's just talk common sense. This isn't that hard.
Yeah, a couple weeks ago when Zach Taylor admitted that he shouldn't have run sideways to try to get a 4th and 1, and it's like kind of what they're paying you to decide in the moment there, bud. I mean, admitting you were wrong the next day is probably a good thing. It's probably commendable, I guess, to at least admit you were wrong. But at the same time, we pay you to get that right.
Yeah, get some thought into this stuff.
One of the biggest things I can take from the way Terry Francona dealt with that team and what we saw in the documentary was that the idea that he makes those things that are complicated. I mean, you've already kind of alluded to this. Let's list them here. Ego, contracts, playing time, defeatist attitudes in a situation when you've got this curse looming over your head, that kind of thing. Or even with the Reds, this lack of winning over this last several decades. Even strategy. What are we going to be analytic? Are we not going to be analytic? And I've heard both. I've heard the move that Francona criticized because, well, he's not analytic enough. And I've heard other people say, well, he got in with those Moneyball people, and I don't know. Come on, whatever. He wins. So all of that, and I think it's amazing that you came up with the same thing. He takes all of that and case by case, and he makes dealing with it simple. And I think that's what you and we watched the same documentary separately, and we've watched his career separately. I don't really know you that well. And we both came up with this idea that he has a good way of explaining things to make it simple.
Yeah, it's gonna be. I think it's gonna be exciting. I don't know what the clubhouse is like. Obviously, I don't know what it's gonna be like. Watching that documentary, I was reminded how tired I thought the idiots and the Cowboy Up stuff was 20 years ago.
I remember that. Yes,
and I think it was still pretty tired. I thought Kevin Millar was annoying 20 years ago. I think he's maybe a little bit less annoying now.
But he's doing it every day still on MLB Network.
I know. I find him annoying on there too. But the one thing I liked about him, though, was like the self-awareness. The one time where he kind of threw Nomar under the bus in an interview.
Oh, he did. Yeah. That was with Dan Patrick. Yeah.
And they're talking about him now. He's talking about it, and he's kind of like, well, he's kind of defending it. He's like, well, I just said, A-Rod's a good player and it'd be good to have him. And he's like, no, actually, let me read it back. And they read back the quote, and it was something way more like, it's great to have A-Rod on the team now. He's the shortstop for us, or something like that.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, crap.
Nomar has a right to be mad. Yes. Yeah,
like, I screwed that up.
But then did you catch the clip later when they were winning, when they were going to win, and there was a mic in the dugout and he made reference to it. He said something of that comment. Like,
oh, really?
He and Manny laughed about it or something, like in the dugout. I caught it toward the end of the documentary, toward the end of them pulling this thing out. And he said something like,
no, I didn't catch that.
I think it might have been when A-Rod hit the glove or did something.
Oh, yeah.
Something like, A-Rod's the guy for us.
I thought Bronson's always just a delight.
Yes.
And, they interview him a few times in there, which I loved. And that guy's one in a million. I wish we could get him around.
Right.
The Reds, for being a god-awful team for the last 25 years, have had some really cool characters.
Mm-hmm.
Really just interesting dudes, like between Bronson and Votto. Adam Dunn was something else. Like, they had a lot of guys around who were just like Dusty Baker, just like I'd like to spend 3 hours at dinner with these guys.
Sure. I think part of that, though, is if you become a huge baseball fan, a huge fan of a specific team, I mean, even before social media and all the ways we interact now, like we always found a way to learn about our guys. You know what I mean? And you're right. It could have been 25 straight years of just boring guys you don't know, like, because that's tough too. I've been a sports writer for several years, and if you go to talk to somebody, like, we'll do interviews, and you could tell the second question by at least then, hey, this interview is I'm going to have to try to really goose up this interview and make it sound better. You know, if it was like for a broadcast or something like that for a football game. But those guys, you're right. If you get the interesting guys, then the stories kind of tell themselves. And guys like, the writers that are in the clubhouse every day, and even the TV guys. And I mean, we can make fun of some of that stuff sometimes, but I think it's been great because we kind of get to know these guys. And that's why even when, I mean, think about 2008 or 9, around in that era when some of those younger guys were starting to come up and things like that. Those were lovable teams.
Yeah.
And they weren't winning yet.
Yeah.
And we found a reason, and that only made it better when they did win, because we've known who Jay Bruce is since he first got drafted, and here we go. And the word affable is used 100 times.
Yeah, I just think there's just a different, some guys, set aside the performance on the field. I just like Votto's way more interesting than Todd Frazier and Ken Griffey put together. You know what I mean? And some of the guys, it's Johnny Cueto seems like an absolutely fascinating dude. The language barrier probably holds back a little bit of getting to know him. We got to rely on his Instagram account for that. But
I wish he was here. I wish the Instagram fame and his time here were more overlapped.
Yeah.
Because we've enjoyed him post Reds career far more on the Instagram with the horses and things like that. We had a few. I neglected. I'm very apologetic to our Patreon subscribers, our patrons. I got caught up in some stuff today and did not send out a request until very late, so that's on me. But Dwight Kelly did send in a question. I'm going to do it now, and then we've got a little bit of news to talk about with the other question. Dwight Kelly said, upon Francona's hiring by the Reds, I almost immediately watched the MLB Network Presents Tito. And he says he subscribed for a month just to grab that and some other content. He wanted to know if we've watched it. It also sheds more light on him as a person and manager. I do remember watching that. They do an excellent job with those, spotlight type documentaries. I haven't watched it lately, so I can't say too much about, the content specifically. But it just goes further to show us what makes him a good leader.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I'm definitely going to check it out now.
Yeah, you should. Those are all, the one on the Wire to Wire Reds was really good too. But this maybe it was the Nasty Boys they talked about quite a bit. But that specifically was very good. They do a great job. Dwight, thanks for sending that in. Let's see here. Okay, let's get on to a little bit of news before we wrap this discussion up tonight. So Nick Martinez did pick up the qualifying offer, and I'm not saying that I said it was absolutely going to happen, but I do know some Riverfront folks who thought it was definitely not going to happen when they extended that offer. It's pretty funny that Scott Boras, basically the day after it leaked that he might accept it, he says, "Oh no, we have multiple multi-year offers already." And I'm like, I don't know about that, and I didn't even know at the time. Actually, that might have been when he declined the option. Between that decision, I was like, I don't know if you're allowed to fielding offers yet, there, Scott. But I don't know. I think, as usual, it's better to have more arms, and 21.05 million, not 21.5 million. 21.05 million is actually getting a decent rate for a decent pitcher, because a lot of these top line starters are signing for 30 plus, 35 plus. So I'm happy that he accepted it. I'm excited to see what he can do next year.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good player for a good price. I don't know if the Reds feel that way. That's what I'm really curious about.
I wonder if they wanted him to reject it so they could get the compensation.
I mean, they're not in the business of paying good players a fair price.
Right.
They're in the business of paying bad players a fair price, or, good players a cheap price. But they don't play in this range hardly at all. I mean, I guess Candelario is close, but
Yeah.
I don't know that he's that good.
Nick Castellanos probably is the comp because he had outs after every year.
Yeah, but I mean that was a little bit. That was kind of a according to the family after COVID, they lost all their money and they can't find it. So
yeah, that's
true.
Kind
of more. Yeah, I mean, there was a time in 2019 when they were seemingly committed to paying good players market rates, but it's just not something they've done a lot. And I just don't know how, if their payroll is going to be kind of flat, what's left for them in their self-defined budget.
Well, the comp I would make to Castellanos is he had a right to walk after that 2020 season, and he didn't play that well, and it was a shortened season, and it was better for him to come back for the one more year. And I would say maybe in both cases the Reds wished, they would have. It's a different. It's a qualifying offer and a player option are two different things, but I guess the only thing I can say is it's a 1-year situation. So their payroll, beyond having signed Hunter Green and being saddled with what they gave Candelario, their payroll is not very, very deep in commitment. They've got Jonathan India for now for one more year. They don't have to go to arbitration with him again this year.
I guess you're right. I mean, they just got some big holes.
They've got big holes and they need to fill them. But let's get to Jerry Gaditz's question. It kind of ties in with that. It says, with Martinez staying, if the Reds add one more starting pitcher and an outfielder, and I'm going to read what he said here, but I have a thought on it. He said, which they have no choice really but to do so, is talking about the outfielder. Is it enough to keep them relevant into late September? Barring no major injuries, of course. Now, I don't know. I mean, the David Bell Reds seem to wilt at the end of seasons. So if you tell me that you're going to put Terry Francona in there and he's going to do what he did in Cleveland for several years in a row, and they actually will play at or above level for those last 2 months, then yes, they can do that. And I think Francona can probably get something out of guys that other people can't. But when he put, which they have no choice but to do so, meaning pick up an outfielder, those are two different things. Are you getting another bargain basement guy that like when they got Will Benson, that was like a hope, right? I'm going to get him and hope he does well. And he did pretty well that one year, and last year he didn't. But yeah, they'll have a body in left field or right field, but that doesn't mean that they've gone out and signed a good one, right?
Yeah, that's the question. I mean, are they going to get a blue chip? I doubt it.
Yeah,
but they kind of need that. I mean, unless, I felt like coming into the last year, the plan was all these prospects that look promising in 2023, we'll pull the slot machine handle and it's going to be cherries all the way across.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that would have been cool if it happened, but that's not a very likely thing to do. And it's a similar thing with these kind of outfield, I won't say 4A guys, but fringy guys, right? I mean, they all have their moments, but none of those guys is a blue chip outfielder. Whether it's Fraley or Friedel or Benson or Stu, like none of those guys are ever going to be in more than one All-Star game.
Oh yeah.
I won't rule out one of them gets hot one year and is hitting 360 in June, but none of those guys are going to make 2 All-Star games in their career.
I'd agree with that. And so that's, boy, we could talk a lot more about the comp that just came to my mind is who lost out more because of COVID than the all-in Reds management, Reds ownership, as far as their decision-making going forward. It's like when the strike hit in 1994, everybody says the Expos, right? They were the team that basically got thrown into the pit of the volcano or something like that. And that's the line of demarcation. The Reds were in first place that year too. So I always felt like, oh man, the Reds had a chance. the 2019 moves they made when they jettisoned Homer Bailey and they did all that magic with I thought was very smart. And then the moves they made going into 2020, of course, Shogo didn't really work out ever. But some of those moves they made, it was like, oh man, they're really trying. This is great. And think about that pitching staff over 162 games with Bauer and Sonny Gray and all those guys they had. I mean, it
was all set up. It was all set up for them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they don't get credit for it, but they really were going for it.
And you think about, we certainly in 2021, Joey Votto had a bit of a renaissance, and you could have a full 2020 and 2021 seasons with some of those players and Votto, and man, yeah. So looking back on that, there's a whole lot of wishing and wondering, but you're right. That's the line of demarcation, similar to the Expos, is we're not spending anymore because we don't want to take the risk.
Yeah, and
that's. I mean, I saw some numbers, and we don't know the books. They never opened the books, right? But there were some numbers that claimed that the Reds ownership was actually clearing quite a bit these past couple of years, and the idea that they just don't spend it because they're worried again, or they're trying to make up for what they may have lost in 2020. I don't know which, but it's obviously the discussion we've had for many years. Yeah. Let me ask you this: do you think why do you think Martinez accepted the QO?
Isn't that a great question? I've been thinking about it. I have no idea, honestly. My guess, because it's awfully early, right? Like, the market's not set. He doesn't know what the market is for him. So it sounds like
I was going to ask that.
I'll put a little bet on myself. It's 21 million is nothing, not anything to scoff at. And let's just, do it and see what the market looks like, and we'll come out. How old is he? Not young, right? I mean,
no, he's not young. Is he? He's not. Is he 34?
I feel like it's something like that.
Here we go. Yeah, 34 years old. Okay. Born in 1990. So he was alive for the last.
Yeah, little baby in somebody's arms.
Went to Fordham.
The Rams.
Yeah. Derek Johnson could have a little to do with it, maybe.
It could be. I mean, it could be something like that. It could be that Scott Boras has a pretty good handle on what the market really is, and said, "Hey, I probably get you 3 for 60, 3 for 50." He's like, "Well, try it again. Let's see."
Yeah. Well, he's not going to get much more than 2 or 3 going forward with his age, but so last year the Padres declined his option, and he ended up with the Reds for like $4 million less. I think it was 18 to 14 million. I had the notes when this all first happened. So this time around, he's getting the qualifying offer as much more than he was even going to get last year with the Padres if they had kept him. I just wonder. I mean, we hear enough of the bad stories, but then you hear the stories like Sonny Gray actually wanted to pitch for the Reds again, and Nick Castellanos wished they would have called. And I mean, goodness gracious, the number of guys who actually liked it there, even though apparently management can't be trusted. That makes it even more frustrating, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if they're getting like hometown discounts, but they certainly aren't having people, fleeing when they come calling. I mean, I think for most guys, I mean, some guys might want to play in Florida or Texas for tax reasons. A very few people probably want to be in a big market, but I think a lot of these guys are like, this is an easy place to live. The media is not going to beat me up. People are going to let me go to the grocery store and not harass me and my family. I think it's probably a pretty comfortable place to play. And they probably do. I mean, it sounds like they treat people okay.
Yeah, I think that part of it has been good in the Castellini ownership. I think the last guy I remember really bashing the team, and I don't bring this up because of the news he's made lately on social media, but I remember Zach Cozart running down the organization after he was gone. But he didn't really stick in Anaheim either.
Yeah, the price says more about him than the organization.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, obviously, if Jonathan India gets traded, I bet we'll hear some things. But you're going to hear some things from Jonathan India anyway. What did you think of that possibility of the trade that with Kansas City that's been rumored these last few days, which probably means it'll never happen?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not like in a position to evaluate the return on it with a lot of confidence, but I've always been low man on India as a player.
Mm-hmm.
I think he should be the odd man out, assuming McLean's healthy.
Yes.
And if you can get some value and let him apply his trade somewhere else, I'd do it in a minute.
The rumor which was all over, Ken Rosenthal and C. Trent Rosecrans were a few of many who had it. Jonathan India for Brady Singer, University of Florida teammates, which is kind of funny and cool.
Crazy.
The thing I liked about Singer's numbers, even though we don't look at record apparently still because he was 9-13, 3.71 ERA, but his 179 2/3 innings would have been, I think, 20 more innings than Homer Bay than Hunter Green had to lead the Reds. So you'd be bringing more of an innings guy, even though that's still not 200, which we won't see probably much more of. And us older guys have to get away from that thinking that you have to go 200 innings to be an effective starting pitcher. But those numbers, again, if you make that trade, and I don't know his salary status, he's relatively same age and things like that as India, you make that trade because you're trying to stock some arms and have more than just a few guys.
Yeah, I mean, I'd do it. Like, unless you can, get a real outfielder for him, which I don't think you could. I mean, he's not a bad baseball player. I just don't think he's a great fit for what they're trying to do. And I know how he sees himself, but I don't know that he's like vital to that clubhouse in truth.
Right. He took over the leadership mantle in 23 when Votto was basically down in AAA rehabbing, even in spring training, and certainly probably had some good part in getting that group of young guys adjusted to big league life. I don't want to take away from him there, but as far as ability on the field, even if Spencer Steer played second base every day, I think you'd probably be better off in the long run. But if Matt McLean's healthy, I know some people don't think. I think Matt McLean's the glue guy that would hold this group together. No. So Brady Singer has a 3.1 career WAR, no, an 8.9 career WAR. As I mentioned, that was 3.1 last year by Baseball Reference. Let's see. He was drafted in 2015 2018 out of college. So, and he was a first round pick. So he's got some time left still. When he came up he made his first appearance in 2020.
Yeah.
So
yeah, he's got what, 5 years?
2020 doesn't count because of the COVID year and number.
Yeah, but 32 starts last year, 29 the year before. That's pretty durable, pretty consistent. He's gone over 150 innings 3 years in a row. There's value in that.
Well, and I'm not the guy that has said they have to trade India as long as some people have said they should. But I remember when Ken Williams got fired by the White Sox, and I thought, no, that's the type of guy that would take a Jonathan India and give us something really good in return.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to bamboozle too many of the analytics GMs. No. And look, he would have. Can you imagine? If he played second base with Bobby Witt Jr. and had a role with those Royals as they're trying to continue to ascend, that's fine. And certainly we're just looking for pitching, and we're looking to shed somebody in a spot that the Reds have a lot of, and that's infielders.
Yep.
So, all right, I am going to check real quick because, as I mentioned, I put out the bat signal a little late. I'm going to check and see if we have any other viewer mails, and we do not. So, again, I apologize for that, but I've had a good time talking with you, and certainly I think, again, your idea, I loved it. Watching that documentary really boosted even more excitement for the coming year. Terry Francona. Well, best of luck to you and your Olentangy Liberty Patriots.
Thank
this
you.
Friday. I will be calling the game for the Bishop Watterson Eagles in Division III in Ohio. So both teams still alive.
It's going to be a fun Friday. I do have one plug.
Okay, go ahead.
The new edition of the Big 50 Cincinnati Reds, authored by Chad Dotson and myself.
That's the old edition behind me.
Huh?
I have the old edition behind me.
Oh, yeah. The new edition, revised and updated, is available for pre-order on Amazon. According to Amazon, we haven't been told this, but according to Amazon, it says March 4th.
Okay.
Release date in 2025. So we went through, we updated everything that needed updating. We also added 3 new chapters with some exciting stuff about the 2023 team and some of the Reds rookies over the year, as well as some the hardest throwing players in Reds history. So
okay,
if you already have it, you may not need the new one. You may want to pick it up at the library. It's up to you. But the book's been out of print. We sold them all for a couple years now. So if you're looking to pick up a copy to get ready for next season, check it out on Amazon or other bookstores.
I have a repeat of Chad Dotson saying the Big 50 over and over in my head now, because he used to pump up when you guys first released the first.
Yeah. We'll have to get him to record that and just put it in as part of the
Big 50. Awesome. Well, right in time for baseball season. That'll be great. And we'll make sure we pump that up a little more as we go along through the winter. Chris Garber, thanks so much for joining me. For Bronson Arroyo, for Terry Francona, and for Willie Mo Pena, who was traded for Bronson Arroyo, I am Seth Shaner. Pleased to have been joined by Chris Garber. So long, everybody.